Welcome to Audio Mentors. In this space, we will dive into a book that invites us to challenge our beliefs about life, relationships, and self-awareness. Today, we will explore Dare to be Disliked, a book that encourages us to question established paradigms and live according to our own principles and values, without depending on external validation. Throughout this book, you will discover how to break free from the limitations of the past, understand the dynamics of human relationships, and take responsibility for your life to achieve peace and authenticity. If you are ready to transform the way you think and live, join me on this journey. Let's begin this journey towards self-awareness and personal growth. And don't forget to subscribe to Audio Mentors for more transformative content. Let's get started. Chapter 1. Introduction: The Value of Being Yourself. In this first chapter, Dare to be Disliked invites us to deeply reflect on the value of being ourselves in a world full of social pressures. The author challenges us to question our beliefs about what it means to live a fulfilling life, arguing that the constant search for approval can be one of the greatest obstacles to achieving an authentic and satisfying existence. The dilemma of wanting to be liked. The author begins this chapter by describing how, from a young age, we are taught to conform to the expectations of others. In school, at home, and in society in general, acceptance by others is presented as a marker of success and well-being. We are conditioned to believe that we are valuable only when we meet others' expectations, creating insecurity and emotional dependency on external recognition. This desire to be accepted or liked becomes a constant in our lives, both in personal relationships and in the professional sphere. However, the author points out that this quest for external approval is not only exhausting, but it also distances us from our truest selves, leading us to live superficially and disconnected from who we truly want to be. The trap of conformity. One of the key reflections in this chapter is how the need to please others traps us in conformity. Often, out of fear of rejection or loneliness, we feel compelled to act in ways that do not reflect our true desires but instead respond to what others expect of us. In the long run, this creates frustration as we feel lost, disconnected from our values, and from our essence. The author invites us to ask ourselves, who am I really? And why do I behave this way? When we stop being true to ourselves in order to be accepted by others, we lose authenticity and inner peace. Life becomes a race to please others, rather than a personal journey of discovery and growth. The value of being yourself. The author proposes that, instead of living constantly seeking approval, the truly valuable thing is to learn to be ourselves without fear of rejection. Authenticity is presented as the key to living a fulfilling life because, when we accept ourselves as we are, we can make decisions based on what we truly want, not on what others think we should do. Authenticity frees us from the weight of others' expectations. By living according to our principles, we feel more secure, at peace, and, most importantly, more connected with ourselves. This, in turn, allows us to attract more genuine relationships and build an environment that respects who we are. Living true to our own principles gives us the power to transform our lives and interactions, as we act from a place of self-confidence and self-acceptance. What does it mean to live authentically? Living authentically does not mean acting selfishly or without considering others. Rather, it is about recognizing our own needs, values, and feelings, and acting accordingly. Being ourselves means accepting our imperfections, acknowledging our weaknesses and working on them, but without denying who we truly are at our core. The author emphasizes that, by stopping living for others and starting to live for ourselves, we begin to make more conscious decisions that align with our deepest values. This authenticity allows us to experience a sense of fulfillment that goes beyond external validation, enabling us to enjoy deeper and more authentic relationships, and a sense of well-being that does not depend on external circumstances. The danger of living by others' expectations. Shetty also reflects on the dangers of always living under others' expectations. When we condition ourselves to be what others expect of us, we begin to experience an internal void, as our actions are not aligned with what we truly want or with our personal values. This void can manifest as anxiety, stress, and a constant sense of dissatisfaction, even when we appear to be achieving what others consider success. Moreover, living by others' expectations can affect our mental and emotional health. The stress of meeting what others think we should do, and the constant fear of rejection if we fail to do so, leads to chronic anxiety. Shetty warns us that living to please others only increases suffering and prevents us from enjoying the freedom of being authentic. The path to personal freedom. The author invites us to take the first step toward personal freedom, freeing ourselves from the need to please everyone. This is a gradual process, but it is essential to begin living with purpose and building an authentic life. Being authentic does not mean rejecting others or living in isolation. Rather, it means simply stopping the constant yielding to external expectations and starting to make decisions based on our own inner voice. Shetty also encourages us to learn to say no when something doesn't resonate with us, without feeling guilty. As we shed the need to please others, we discover that we have more energy and clarity to focus on what really matters. This process of self-liberation is the key to living a fuller, happier, and more authentic life. The importance of self-acceptance. At the conclusion of this chapter, Shetty reflects on the concept of self-acceptance. Accepting oneself is the first step toward true emotional freedom. Rather than fighting against our imperfections, we must learn to accept and appreciate them as part of our humanity. Self-acceptance allows us to release the fear of rejection and external judgment, and to live with self-compassion and self-love. The author reminds us that the path to inner peace begins when we stop seeking perfection and accept our own vulnerability. By doing so, we begin to live a more authentic life, connected to our values and purpose. Chapter 2. The First Night, Trauma Doesn't Exist. In this chapter, the author challenges us to reconsider the widely accepted notion that trauma has the power to determine or define our lives. Through in-depth analysis, the chapter argues that while difficult experiences may mark our lives, it is not the traumatic experiences that limit us, but how we interpret them and how we choose to live with them. Trauma and personal interpretation. The author begins by explaining that the concept of trauma in many cultures and psychological systems is overloaded with negative connotations. We have been taught to believe that certain painful or tragic experiences can leave irreparable marks on our lives, and that those marks determine who we are and how we behave in the future. However, the author argues that trauma is not something that defines us absolutely. Instead of viewing trauma as an insurmountable barrier, we must change the way we look at it. It is the interpretation of an experience that truly has the power to influence our lives. The author calls for us to adopt a more proactive mindset, one that allows us to overcome difficulties, rather than holding on to a victim narrative. Adlerian psychology. This chapter introduces Adlerian psychology, which proposes that we are not victims of our past experiences but have the capacity to choose how we respond to them. According to Alfred Adler, one of the great figures in psychology, our past experiences, even painful ones, are not what limit us, but rather how we choose to interpret them and the choices we make based on them. Adler argued that we all have the ability to change, regardless of the experiences we've had. Through our own effort, we can break the chains of the past and rewrite our story. This concept is liberating because it gives us the power to change our lives, even if the initial circumstances were not favorable. Overcoming the past. The author explains that one of the biggest mistakes is to permanently identify ourselves with our traumas and past experiences. Living a life based on the pain of what has happened prevents us from moving forward, as identification with suffering becomes a psychological barrier that prevents us from developing. Shetty invites us to free ourselves from this victimization narrative. He encourages us to recognize that, although past experiences are important, they do not define us. By doing so, we have the opportunity to rebuild our lives from the decisions we make in the present. The key lies in the shift of perspective. It's not about denying what happened, but reframing those experiences as life lessons that strengthen us. Choice and personal responsibility. The chapter continues exploring how true freedom lies in taking responsibility for our lives. It doesn't matter what happened in the past. What matters is what we choose to do with what we have now. Personal responsibility is the first step toward empowerment. Instead of seeing ourselves as slaves to the past, we should view it as an opportunity to create new narratives based on our conscious choices. The author uses examples of people who have experienced severe difficulties in their lives but, through self-acceptance and the conscious decision to change, have been able to transform their lives and overcome what limited them. This ability to choose gives us the power to decide who we want to be, regardless of the obstacles we encounter. The importance of changing our interpretation of pain. The author emphasizes that pain and difficulties are inevitable in life, but what truly matters is the way we interpret them. If we view suffering as something that destroys us or marks us forever, we are limited by that belief. If instead, we view suffering as something that teaches us and helps us grow, we can transform it into a source of strength. Rather than letting the past define our identity, we must accept the pain and see it as a teacher that allows us to evolve and learn from our experiences. This way of seeing suffering not only empowers us but also frees us from the emotional chains that keep us tied to a painful past. The power of emotional reconfiguration. Finally, Shetty suggests a technique of emotional reconfiguration to change our response to pain. Instead of getting trapped in sadness or anger, we must learn to reconfigure our emotional response to each negative event. The idea is that feelings of helplessness and identification with suffering are learned responses, and we can learn new ways to react to difficulties. Emotional reconfiguration involves not only changing our way of thinking but also taking conscious action to change our automatic responses. This allows us to live a life free from the burdens of the past and focus on what we can do now to build our future. Conclusion of the chapter. In this chapter, the author presents a powerful challenge. Trauma doesn't exist, at least not in the way we have conceptualized it. What truly limits us is not what has happened to us, but how we choose to interpret those events and the decisions we make based on those interpretations. Freedom and empowerment come from taking responsibility for our lives and freeing ourselves from limiting beliefs about our past. This approach changes the way we view suffering and gives us the power to make conscious decisions that lead us toward a fuller, more authentic life. Chapter 3. The Unknown Third Giant. Adlerian Psychology. In this chapter, the author introduces us to the concept of the third giant of psychology, referring to Alfred Adler, an influential psychologist who developed fundamental theories about individual psychology. Shetty explains how Adler's teachings can help us better understand our internal motivations, how we relate to others, and how we can transform our lives by applying his principles. In this sense, Adler is considered one of the most important figures in modern psychology, but his approach has largely been forgotten or sidelined by the dominant Freudian and behaviorist psychological frameworks. Adlerian psychology. Adlerian psychology focuses on the individual and their relationship with society, arguing that the sense of belonging and the search for meaning are essential for a healthy and fulfilling life. Unlike other psychological theories, such as Freudian psychology, which emphasizes past traumas and childhood difficulties, Adler believed that individuals have the capacity to change and overcome any limitations of their past. According to Adler, our perception of our life and our ability to face challenges is what truly defines our well-being. The struggle for power and the sense of inferiority. Shetty explains how Adler viewed the feeling of inferiority as one of the main drivers of human behavior. This feeling of insufficiency or disadvantage can have a significant impact on how we see ourselves and how we relate to others. However, Adler did not view this as something negative but as a challenge that drives us to grow. The way we respond to this feeling determines our life. If we use the feeling of inferiority as a force that pushes us to improve, we can reach our fullest potential. If, on the other hand, we allow it to control us, we will feel trapped and weakened. The author mentions that one of the greatest challenges is understanding how we face adversity. According to Adler, the key lies in how we manage this sense of inferiority. Instead of retreating into ourselves and giving up, we should use this feeling as an impetus to move forward and grow. This is one of the fundamental teachings of Adlerian psychology. We are responsible for our evolution and how we face obstacles. The importance of community. Adler also emphasized that, in order to be emotionally healthy, we need to feel that we belong to a community and contribute to the well-being of others. Shetty emphasizes how this sense of belonging is key to understanding human behavior. People tend to seek validation and feel connected to their environment. However, This search for belonging should not be conditioned by the need to please others but by the desire to collaborate and share with others. The author highlights that our ability to be authentic in our relationships depends on how we manage our need for acceptance and our sense of belonging. In Adlerian psychology, community is not a space of validation or external approval, but a place where we support each other to grow and overcome challenges. The sense of life and motivation. Shetty describes how motivation in Adlerian psychology is not centered on the pursuit of pleasure or the avoidance of pain, as in Freudian theory, but on the search for a higher purpose. Adler believed that people tend to act based on goals that give meaning to their lives. Human motivation, according to Adler, is deeply influenced by our vision of the future and the meaning we attach to our lives. This idea that people seek meaning in their lives is fundamental to understanding how we can face difficulties. Rather than getting stuck in the pain of the past, we can choose to look toward the future and work toward a greater goal. According to Shetty, this does not mean ignoring the past but simply taking responsibility for who we are and making sure our present decisions align with our values and personal goals. The importance of personal responsibility. Adlerian psychology emphasizes that, beyond the challenges we face, we have the power to decide how we live our lives. Shetty refers to how personal responsibility is the central axis of the Adlerian approach. We are not victims of our past or our current circumstances, but rather, we are responsible for our decisions. The way we choose to view our difficulties, how we face them, and how we progress in our lives depends solely on us. Adler urges us not to blame others for what happens to us but to take control of our lives and be proactive in creating the life we desire. Personal power is in our hands, and we can choose how to react to the situations that arise. This active responsibility is liberating because it gives us control over our destiny and allows us to grow from any circumstance. Conclusion of the chapter. In this chapter, Shetty presents Adlerian psychology as a powerful means for personal transformation. He invites us to free ourselves from the idea of being victims of the past and to take responsibility for our lives. By understanding the feeling of inferiority, the value of belonging, and the search for a purpose, we can change the way we view life and make decisions that are more aligned with our personal values. This empowering approach invites us to break free from dependence on external validation and to live according to our deepest goals and purposes. True freedom lies in recognizing that we are the architects of our lives and that we have the power to build the future we desire. Chapter 4. Why People Can Change. The Capacity for Transformation. In this chapter, the author delves into one of the fundamental premises of Adlerian psychology, the capacity for change and transformation. Throughout the book, it has been mentioned that the past does not have to determine the future, and in this chapter, we explore how we all have the power to change our way of thinking, our actions, and ultimately our lives. True freedom lies in understanding that we are responsible for our personal evolution and that change is possible through our conscious decisions and efforts. Change as a personal process. Shetty begins the chapter by pointing out that change does not happen immediately or magically but is an ongoing process that requires effort, patience, and a growth mindset. Often, people feel trapped in their habits or circumstances, believing they do not have the power to change, but this thinking limits our potential. The author challenges this belief, arguing that we all have the capacity to transform our lives if we take control of our mindset. Change, according to Shetty, begins with the willingness to question our beliefs and accept that we are responsible for the decisions we make, even when circumstances seem difficult or unfair. The awareness that we can choose how to respond to what happens to us is the first step in unlocking the transformative potential within us. The importance of self-knowledge. Self-knowledge plays a crucial role in the process of change. Shetty emphasizes that we cannot change what we do not understand. Knowing our strengths, weaknesses, fears, and deepest desires enables us to identify the areas where we need to work and improve. Through self-observation and reflection, we can become more aware of our thought patterns and the beliefs that limit us. This self-knowledge provides the clarity needed to begin making decisions that are more aligned with the person we wish to become. The power of a growth mindset. Shetty introduces the concept of a growth mindset, a term used in psychology that refers to the belief that our abilities, intelligence, and talents can be developed through effort and dedication. This mindset contrasts with a fixed mindset, where it is believed that our abilities are innate and cannot be changed. People with a growth mindset are more willing to learn from their mistakes, face challenges, and persevere in the face of difficulties because they believe every experience is an opportunity for learning. Shetty encourages us to adopt a growth mindset to break the barriers that prevent us from growing and changing. By doing so, we can begin to see failure as part of the process and an opportunity for improvement, rather than something negative or final. Overcoming limiting beliefs. One of the biggest obstacles to change is limiting beliefs. These beliefs are rooted in our psyche and tell us that we are not good enough or that we cannot change. Shetty highlights how these beliefs are self-fulfilling, meaning that if we believe we cannot do something, our mind creates situations that confirm this belief. The author urges us to question these limiting beliefs, as they are often not based on objective realities but on fears or past experiences. Through self-knowledge and self-acceptance, we can dismantle these beliefs and replace them with more empowering and positive thoughts. In doing so, we can break the chains that bind us and begin to act more decisively and confidently. The importance of conscious decisions. Shetty also speaks about the power of making conscious decisions. Throughout our lives, we often act automatically, following behavior patterns that we have learned or that have been imposed on us by society. However, true change only happens when we begin to make conscious decisions that bring us closer to the person we want to be. These decisions must align with our values, goals, and the purpose we have set for our lives. By doing this, we ensure that every action we take brings us closer to our ideal version of ourselves and allows us to create a full and fulfilling life. The author emphasizes that personal responsibility is key to this process, as although we cannot control everything that happens around us, we can decide how we respond to those situations. The role of fear in the change process. The fear of failure or the unknown is one of the main obstacles to change. Shetty addresses how fear can paralyze us and make us avoid making important decisions. However, the author encourages us to see fear as a signal that we are on the right path. When we face situations that scare us, it is an indication that we are stepping out of our comfort zone and moving toward personal growth. Fear is a natural response of the brain, but it should not dictate our actions. By learning to manage fear and take action despite it, we can break the inertia and move forward on our journey of personal transformation. Shetty emphasizes that fear is just a fleeting emotion, and true growth only happens when we face it with courage and determination. The importance of social support. Although change is a personal process, Shetty highlights the importance of social support. Surrounding ourselves with people who inspire us, support us, and share our goals is essential to maintaining motivation and determination. The author suggests that we seek relationships that enrich us and challenge us to be better, rather than those that limit us or discourage us. The support of a positive community can be a great catalyst for change. Whether in a community of family, friends, or even larger support groups, the company of others can give us the push we need to move forward. Conclusion of the chapter. This chapter gives us great hope. Personal transformation is possible for everyone, regardless of our past circumstances. Through self-knowledge, a change in mindset, and a commitment to conscious decisions, we can take control of our lives and be the architects of our own destiny. The ability to change is within each of us, and it is our responsibility to harness that power to live a fuller, more authentic, and accomplished life. Chapter 5. Trauma does not exist, overcoming the past. In this chapter, the author challenges one of the most common beliefs in psychology and personal development, the idea that trauma is something that defines and conditions our lives permanently. Although difficult and painful experiences may leave emotional scars, Shetty argues that the real obstacle is not the trauma itself, but how we interpret it and how we identify with it. The key to overcoming the past lies in our ability to change our perception of those events and take responsibility for how we want to live now. The concept of trauma and its limiting power. From a young age, we are taught that traumas, whether emotional, physical, or psychological, are something that leaves an irreversible mark on our lives. This view, although valid in certain contexts, can become an emotional prison if we are unable to transform our relationship with the past. The author points out that the concept of trauma is overly simplified. Often, what truly limits us is not the event itself, but how we interpret it and how we allow it to affect our present life. Trauma is a label we place on experiences that are painful or that we consider have harmed us. However, the author makes a key point: trauma is not a fate. We do not have to live our lives as slaves to what happened. Instead of identifying with the trauma, we can redefine it and use it as a driving force for personal growth. Shetty invites us to change our mindset to free ourselves from the past and focus on what we can create in the present and future. Reinterpreting the past. One of the most powerful ideas in this chapter is that the reinterpretation of our past experiences is the first step toward emotional liberation. The author argues that trauma is not something we should carry with us forever. Instead of being victims of the past, we can change our perspective on what happened to us. Through this process of reinterpretation, we can transform pain and difficulties into life lessons that strengthen us rather than limit us. Shetty explains that often, people identify with their emotional wounds and believe that their personal story is defined by what has happened to them. This thought pattern becomes a burden that prevents us from moving forward. The author's proposal is that, instead of viewing the past as a chain, we see it as an experience that we can use to grow. By redefining trauma, it is no longer something that traps us, but a source of power to transform ourselves. The importance of living in the present. The chapter also emphasizes the importance of focusing on the present. Living anchored in the past, worrying about what happened or what could have been, prevents us from enjoying the present and leads us to feel that we have no control over our lives. Shetty reminds us that the past is irreversible and we cannot change what has already occurred. What we truly have is the power to decide how we want to live the present. The author argues that, if we keep focusing on the wounds of the past, we are robbing ourselves of the opportunity to create something new. The past only has power over us if we continue to feed it. To live fully in the present, we must learn to let go of what no longer serves us and focus on the opportunities the present offers. Living with intention and clarity in the present allows us to take control of our lives and steer them toward the future we desire. The impact of limiting beliefs. Shetty delves into how limiting beliefs are one of the greatest obstacles to overcoming the past. These beliefs are the negative thoughts or generalizations we have internalized over time, often stemming from painful experiences. We believe these beliefs about ourselves are absolute truths, but the author reminds us that these ideas do not have to be definitive. Limiting beliefs such as, "I am not capable," "I do not deserve to be happy," or "the pain of the past defines me," are merely thoughts that, if we do not question them, can become barriers preventing us from moving forward. The author encourages us to challenge these limiting beliefs and replace them with positive, empowering thoughts. The first step is to become aware of them and then actively work to transform them into something more useful and healthy for our present lives. The importance of self-acceptance. A central aspect of the chapter is self-acceptance. The author emphasizes that to overcome the past, we must start by accepting ourselves as we are, with our imperfections, mistakes, and past experiences. Self-acceptance is the first step to freeing ourselves from the guilt and resentment that bind us. Self-acceptance allows us to be more compassionate with ourselves and understand that we all make mistakes, but that does not make us less valuable. Shetty invites us to practice self-compassion and free ourselves from the expectations of perfection that society often imposes on us. Only when we fully accept ourselves, with our shadows and light, can we move forward and create a more authentic life. The power of resilience. The author introduces the concept of resilience as an essential component to overcoming the past. Resilience does not mean ignoring pain or trauma, but having the internal strength to recover and move forward. Shetty highlights that resilience is a skill that can be developed and that every challenge we face gives us the opportunity to strengthen ourselves. Resilience involves learning from our falls and using those lessons to grow. Through resilience, we can rebuild ourselves and live with a growth mindset, rather than staying stuck in what happened to us. The chapter emphasizes that, while suffering is an inevitable part of life, how we respond to it is what determines our strength and capacity for transformation. Conclusion of the chapter. The chapter concludes with a key reminder: Trauma is not a fate, nor is it something that needs to define our life forever. The past does not control us. Rather, we are the ones who decide how to face it and how to move forward. The true power lies in the reinterpretation of the past, in learning to accept ourselves, and in consciously deciding to live in the present with purpose and fulfillment. This chapter empowers us to break the chains of the past and rebuild our lives through conscious actions and personal transformation. The future is in our hands, and with each step toward the present, we can begin to create the life we truly want. Chapter 6, Anger as a Tool, Uses and Consequences. In this chapter, the author explores the concept of anger from a perspective different from the traditional one. Instead of seeing it merely as a destructive emotion, Shetty proposes that anger can be a powerful tool when used appropriately. Throughout the chapter, it is explored how we can channel anger constructively to generate change and personal growth, while also addressing the dangers of allowing anger to control our decisions and relationships. Anger as a natural response. Shetty begins this chapter by explaining that anger, like other human emotions, is a natural response to situations that we perceive as unfair or threatening. Anger is not inherently negative, it is a sign that something is not working as it should. In fact, it can be a defense mechanism that alerts us to injustice, disrespect, or violation of our boundaries. The author encourages us not to reject anger, but to recognize it and understand its origin. By doing so, we can use it effectively to address situations that cause us discomfort. Anger can be a warning signal inviting us to review our circumstances and make changes if necessary. The danger of repressing anger. One of the key ideas in this chapter is that repressing anger is unhealthy. Shetty warns us that when we do not allow anger to express itself properly, it can accumulate and later manifest uncontrollably, affecting our emotional and physical health. Repressed anger can be a source of chronic stress, anxiety, and resentment. By not releasing this emotion properly, we risk it impacting our relationships and our quality of life. The author suggests that repressing anger can also deny us the opportunity to defend ourselves or address problems effectively. Instead of suppressing it, we must learn to manage our anger in a healthy and conscious way, allowing it to become a force for positive change. Anger as a tool for setting boundaries. One of the key points of the chapter is that anger can be used as a tool to establish healthy boundaries. Shetty explains that anger can be a way to reclaim our autonomy and defend our values. When something or someone crosses our boundaries, anger can serve as a signal to draw a line and say, "This is not acceptable." The author emphasizes that, rather than seeing anger as a negative emotion that must be suppressed, we should view it as an opportunity to strengthen our emotional boundaries and protect our well-being. By learning to express our anger appropriately, we can prevent others from invading our emotional space and ensure that unjust situations are corrected. The negative impact of unmanaged anger. While anger can be a powerful tool, Shetty also points out the dangers of letting anger control us. When we allow anger to guide our actions without awareness or moderation, it can become a destructive force. Unmanaged anger can lead to emotional outbursts that damage our relationships and hinder our opportunities for growth. The author mentions how people who do not manage their anger appropriately can become harmful to themselves and others. Uncontrolled anger can destroy personal and professional relationships, create unnecessary conflicts, and emotionally affect us. Additionally, accumulated resentment due to improperly expressed anger can be a source of chronic anxiety and stress. Strategies for channeling anger positively. Throughout the chapter, Shetty offers several practical strategies for channeling anger constructively. These include: recognize the anger. The first step is to be aware of when we are angry and why. By identifying the origin of our anger, we can make more rational decisions about how to respond. Practice emotional self-regulation. Instead of exploding in response to a situation that bothers us, Shetty suggests taking a moment to breathe deeply, calm our minds, and reassess the situation before acting impulsively. Healthy expression of anger. Instead of repressing or exploding, it is helpful to communicate assertively how we feel and why. Speaking calmly and firmly, without aggression, can help us express our boundaries in a constructive way. Seek solutions. Rather than focusing solely on what bothers us, Shetty suggests we channel our energy into solutions. Anger is a sign that something is wrong. Instead of staying stuck on the problem, we can use it as a prompt to find a resolution. Redirect the energy. If we feel that anger is about to overflow, an effective way to channel it positively is to exercise or engage in some creative or productive activity. This helps release accumulated tension in a healthy way. Anger and interpersonal relationships. Shetty also reflects on how anger can affect our interpersonal relationships. People who do not manage their anger tend to create distance from others, as unmanaged anger can hurt and isolate those around us. By learning to express anger respectfully and consciously, we can avoid damaging our relationships and, instead, strengthen communication and mutual respect. The author also mentions that, when we learn to communicate our emotions honestly and directly, we can significantly improve our relationships and avoid misunderstandings that arise from a lack of emotional transparency. Conclusion of the chapter. In this chapter, Shetty teaches us that anger is not an enemy but a natural emotion that can be used constructively if we learn to manage it. While anger can be a powerful force for change, we must channel it appropriately to avoid letting it control our lives and relationships. Self-regulation, assertive self-expression, and seeking solutions are key tools for using anger as a positive force. The true skill lies in facing anger with awareness and responsibility, so it becomes a force for personal growth and the strengthening of our relationships. Chapter 7. How to live without letting the past control us. In this chapter, the author addresses a fundamental topic: how to free ourselves from the weight of the past in order to live a fuller, more autonomous life. Often, we find ourselves trapped in the emotional footprints of our past experiences, whether due to failures, mistakes, or unresolved pains. However, Shetty shows us that, while the past is part of our story, it does not have to define our identity or determine our future. Through a series of strategies and deep reflections, the chapter guides us on how to break the chains that tie us to the past and consciously take control of our present and future. The power of the present. The chapter begins by emphasizing the importance of living in the present. Many people feel trapped in what happened before, preventing them from fully enjoying the now. Shetty explains that the past only exists in our minds, and that the only real moment is the present. Often, our minds get stuck in the past, repeatedly reliving the same mistakes, resentments, or wounds. However, the author encourages us to let go of those thoughts and focus on what we can do today to change our lives. Living in the present. Living in the present allows us to enjoy each moment, take advantage of our current opportunities, and make conscious decisions that bring us closer to our purpose. This approach helps us let go of concerns about what we can no longer change and invites us to act according to our desires and values in the here and now. The influence of the past on our identity. One of the keys to understanding how to free ourselves from the past is realizing how the past shapes our identity. Shetty argues that often we identify with our past experiences, especially the difficult ones, and these experiences define us. If we have gone through failures or emotional wounds, we tend to see ourselves as victims of those circumstances. Identifying with the pain or suffering can limit our ability to see our lives from a positive or hopeful perspective. However, the author invites us to question this identification with the past. The past is nothing more than a part of our story, but it should not be what defines who we are or what we can achieve in the future. Identity is not predetermined by past circumstances. We can decide who we are and who we want to be in the future, regardless of the adversities we've faced. The fear of change. Shetty also reflects on how the fear of change keeps us trapped in the past. Often, even though we know we need to change, we are afraid to step out of our comfort zones. The author explains that fear of the unknown is a natural barrier to change, but he also notes that change is inevitable. If we do not take the initiative to change our attitudes and actions, life will continue to repeat the same patterns that hold us back. The fear of change may be based on limiting beliefs that we have acquired over the years, such as the belief that we do not deserve something better or that the past holds more power than the future. However, Shetty urges us to face that fear because it is through conscious change that we can free ourselves from the past and create the future we desire. Forgiveness as a tool for liberation. One of the most powerful themes of the chapter is forgiveness. Shetty emphasizes that forgiveness is not only essential for healing our relationships with others but also for healing our relationship with the past. The author stresses that forgiving does not mean forgetting what has harmed us, but rather freeing ourselves from the emotional weight of resentment. According to Shetty, resentment is like a burden we carry in our hearts, and the longer we hold on to it, the more we poison ourselves emotionally. Forgiveness is a conscious decision to let go of grudges and release the control the past has over us. Forgiveness applies not only to others who have hurt us but also to ourselves for the mistakes we've made. By forgiving ourselves, we release our hearts and minds, opening the way for new opportunities and personal growth. Letting go of resentment and guilt. Shetty dedicates a section of the chapter to addressing how resentment and guilt are two of the biggest obstacles to overcoming the past. Resentment toward others keeps us tied to painful experiences, while guilt keeps us anchored in our own mistakes, preventing us from moving forward. The author argues that, while it is normal to feel guilt after making mistakes, staying trapped in guilt only perpetuates the pain. Guilt makes us believe that we do not deserve something better or that our lives will never improve. Just like resentment, forgiveness is key to freeing ourselves from guilt. By learning from our mistakes and moving forward without living under the shadow of guilt, we can grow and evolve. The power of action to free ourselves from the past. One of the most powerful solutions Shetty offers for living without being controlled by the past is taking action. It is not enough to reflect on what has happened to us, we need to act to change our reality. Conscious action allows us to break the cycle of the past and steer our lives toward the future we want. Shetty suggests that when we feel trapped by memories or the pain of the past, we can take small decisions and actions in the present that help us move forward. It could be as simple as changing a limiting habit, setting new goals, or even talking to someone we trust about what concerns us. The key is to act with determination to change our internal narrative and the way we experience the present. The power of gratitude to let go of the past. Finally, Shetty reminds us of the transformative power of gratitude. Practicing gratitude helps us focus on the positive and on what we have rather than on what we lack. When we are grateful, we stop focusing on the suffering of the past and begin to appreciate the present moment. Gratitude allows us to appreciate the lessons we've learned from difficulties and see them as opportunities for growth. This mindset of gratitude opens us to new possibilities and frees us from the emotional burden of the past, creating space for a future filled with hope and purpose. Chapter 8, Socrates and Adler, Philosophy Applied to Self-Knowledge. In this chapter, Shetty invites us to explore the philosophical teachings of two great thinkers, Socrates and Alfred Adler. Throughout the chapter, the author connects the philosophical ideas of these two men with the concept of self-knowledge and how, by applying their teachings in everyday life, we can live in a more authentic, full, and conscious way. Know thyself. Shetty begins the chapter with a reflection on Socrates' famous phrase, "Know thyself," which is inscribed in classical philosophy as the foundation for achieving true knowledge and wisdom. Socrates believed that self-knowledge was the starting point for any kind of personal transformation. According to Socrates, if we do not understand who we are, what we want, and what motivates us, we will never be able to make wise decisions or live in alignment with our values and goals. The author reflects on the importance of self-observation in the process of self-knowledge. It is not just about knowing our strengths and weaknesses, but understanding our emotions, our motivations, and how they influence our decisions. Self-knowledge empowers us to act consciously and transform our lives according to what we truly desire and value. The importance of questioning our beliefs. The author also emphasizes that, to achieve deep self-knowledge, we must learn to question our beliefs and assumptions about ourselves and the world. Socrates used the Socratic method of questioning, which involves asking open-ended questions that make us reflect on our own ideas. This approach helps break limiting beliefs and allows us to see the world from a broader, more unbiased perspective. Shetty invites us to practice this type of questioning in our daily lives. When we face difficult situations or important decisions, we should ask ourselves, why am I reacting this way? Where do my beliefs about this issue come from? Is this the best way to view the situation? By questioning our own beliefs, we create space for personal growth and transformation. Alfred Adler and individual psychology. Next, Shetty introduces Alfred Adler, a psychologist often considered the third giant of psychology after Freud and Jung. Unlike Freud, who placed great emphasis on past experiences and the unconscious, Adler focused on how our current decisions and our perception of the future affect our lives. According to Adler, people are not defined by the past, but by the conscious choices they make in the present. Adler also highlighted that the feeling of inferiority is one of the most powerful motivating forces in humanity. We all face challenges and feelings of inadequacy, but the difference lies in how we respond to these feelings. Some people allow the feeling of inferiority to defeat them, while others use it as a driving force to improve themselves. According to Adler, our future is not determined by what happens to us, but by how we choose to face these difficulties. The feeling of inferiority and personal growth. Shetty connects the concept of the feeling of inferiority with the process of personal growth. Often, life's difficulties make us feel less capable or less valuable. However, Adler proposes that this sense of inferiority does not have to be an obstacle. In fact, it can be a source of motivation. By recognizing our weaknesses and working on them, we can overcome challenges and grow significantly. Shetty emphasizes that the path to personal growth begins by accepting that we all have difficulties and that no one is exempt from challenges. By facing our limitations and seeking ways to overcome them, we grow and become stronger. Instead of letting our weaknesses define us, we can use them as a springboard to reach our goals. The importance of living according to our values. Both Socrates and Adler agree that true happiness and well-being are found by living according to our own principles. Socrates advocated for authenticity, and Adler believed that living according to our values is key to achieving a fulfilling life. Shetty highlights that many times we live according to what others expect of us, and this disconnection from our own values leads to dissatisfaction and stress. The author encourages us to take time to reflect on what we truly value and live in alignment with those values. Living authentically allows us to make decisions that bring us closer to happiness and give us inner peace. In doing so, we not only improve our personal lives, but we also improve our relationships with others, as we are being honest and genuine at all times. How to apply the teachings of Socrates and Adler. The author offers practical strategies to apply the teachings of these two thinkers in our daily lives. Daily self-knowledge. Dedicate time each day to reflect on your thoughts, emotions, and actions. Practice self-questioning. Why do I think this way? Where do my beliefs come from? Am I acting in alignment with what I truly want? Face your feelings of inferiority. Instead of hiding from your insecurities, acknowledge and work with them. Use difficulties and challenges as opportunities to grow and overcome what limits you. Live according to your values. Take an inventory of what you truly value in life. What principles guide your decisions? Live in alignment with those values and make them part of your daily identity. Embrace change. Both Socrates and Adler emphasized the importance of personal transformation. Don't stay stuck in the past. Embracing conscious change is crucial to achieving self-knowledge and personal growth. Conclusion of the chapter. This chapter invites us to incorporate the wisdom of Socrates and Adler to develop a fuller and more autonomous life. By applying the concept of self-knowledge and constant reflection, we can free ourselves from limiting beliefs and live authentically. The teachings of these two thinkers show us that change and growth are not only possible but essential for achieving true well-being. Chapter 9. Do you feel good about yourself? In this chapter, Shetty delves into a fundamental topic for our inner peace and well-being, the importance of feeling good about ourselves. Often, we seek external validation and base our self-esteem on the opinions of others. However, the author challenges us to question whether we are truly at peace with who we are at our core and offers tools to strengthen our self-esteem from within. Self-acceptance as the foundation of happiness. Shetty begins the chapter by emphasizing the importance of self-acceptance. Throughout life, we are exposed to external criticism telling us how we should be and what we should do. However, this external focus leads us to live for others, setting aside our own authenticity. According to Shetty, The key to happiness is accepting ourselves as we are, with our imperfections and flaws. Only through self-acceptance can we begin to live authentically and free from external pressures. The author emphasizes that self-acceptance does not mean settling for less or stopping work on ourselves. Rather, it involves recognizing our strengths and weaknesses and learning to live in peace with who we are. Self-acceptance is the foundation upon which we build confidence and self-esteem. This is the difference between living under the influence of others' expectations and living according to our own decisions and values. The impact of comparisons. Shetty also addresses how comparisons with others affect our ability to feel good about ourselves. In modern society, social media and the media constantly present models of success and perfection, making us feel like we are never measuring up. The author points out that this draining phenomenon can cause us to lose our own identity by comparing ourselves to others, especially if we measure ourselves against others' standards. The key, according to Shetty, is learning to appreciate who we are without falling into the trap of constant comparison. We are all unique and have our own abilities. Instead of comparing ourselves, we should focus on our own journey and recognize the achievements and progress we have made over time. Comparison only strips us of our inner peace, while self-acceptance and self-awareness empower us. The power of gratitude in self-acceptance. A powerful tool Shetty introduces in this chapter is gratitude. Often, our perception of ourselves is clouded by what we lack or what we haven't accomplished. However, by practicing gratitude for what we already have and for who we are, we can redefine our self-perception. Gratitude anchors us to the present and helps us recognize our blessings instead of focusing on what we believe is missing. Shetty suggests that a daily gratitude exercise can transform our perception of ourselves and the world. By starting the day with thoughts of gratitude, we can shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance. This not only improves our relationships with others but also strengthens our self-esteem because we begin to see ourselves as enough just as we are. The relationship between self-esteem and authenticity. Throughout the chapter, Shetty highlights that our self-esteem is directly related to our authenticity. When we live according to our own principles and do not seek to add labels or behave as others expect, our self-esteem strengthens. Authenticity allows us to be true to ourselves, which is essential for having a positive self-image. The author also mentions that authenticity is reflected in our actions, decisions, and our ability to say no when something is not aligned with our true essence. Living authentically means not being swayed by others' expectations but having the confidence to make decisions that truly resonate with our true nature. This alignment between who we are internally and what we express externally is key to maintaining strong self-esteem. Living without the need for external validation. The author highlights the importance of freeing ourselves from the need for external validation. For a long time, we have been conditioned to seek approval from others, whether in our personal relationships, at work, or even on social media. This desire to please and be recognized can cause us to lose our authenticity and stray from our true self. Shetty suggests that we stop living for others and begin living for ourselves. By doing so, we not only regain our freedom but also boost our self-esteem, as we no longer rely on external opinions to feel that we are good enough. True inner peace and self-esteem arise when we accept and value ourselves for who we are, without expecting anything in return from others. Building unshakable self-esteem. The author provides key strategies to build and maintain unshakable self-esteem. Practice self-compassion. Learn to be kind to ourselves and forgive ourselves for our mistakes, instead of constantly criticizing ourselves. Self-compassion allows us to recognize our imperfections without letting them define us. Set healthy boundaries. Saying no when something is not aligned with our values is crucial for maintaining our self-esteem. By learning to set clear boundaries, we ensure we don't lose our authenticity to please others. Reflect on achievements. Instead of focusing only on what we lack, we must learn to celebrate our achievements, no matter how small. This constant reflection on our strengths and progress helps strengthen our self-image. Develop inner power. The author emphasizes that true self-esteem comes from our inner power and from knowing that we are enough as we are. When we realize that we don't need external validation to feel valuable, our self-esteem becomes more resilient. Conclusion of the chapter. In this chapter, Shetty shows us that self-acceptance is crucial for building solid self-esteem. By freeing ourselves from comparisons, practicing gratitude, and living according to our values, we can strengthen our relationship with ourselves and achieve an authentic and fulfilling life. True inner peace and well-being come from the unconditional acceptance of who we are, without depending on external approval. Chapter 10. Being unhappy is a personal choice. The power of decision. In this chapter, Shetty presents one of the most impactful ideas of the book. Being unhappy is a personal choice. While life's circumstances may affect our experiences, the author argues that, ultimately, unhappiness comes from how we choose to react to them. Rather than feeling trapped by what happens to us, Shetty encourages us to take control of our happiness through conscious decisions, positive attitudes, and transformative perspectives. Happiness does not depend on external circumstances. The author begins the chapter by highlighting an essential truth. Happiness is not something that happens to us, but something we choose to create. Often, we live life under the premise that if things were different, we would be happy. However, Shetty challenges us to recognize that our happiness does not depend on having more money, more success, a perfect relationship, or the approval of others. These are external factors that can affect our lives, but what truly defines our well-being is how we interpret and respond to those circumstances. True happiness begins within us. It is a personal decision. While difficult situations or challenges may be inevitable, how we choose to react to them is what truly determines our emotional experience. By understanding this, Shetty invites us to free ourselves from the victim mentality and take responsibility for our own happiness. Unhappiness, then, is the result of how we choose to view and face difficulties. The power of perspective. Shetty explains that perspective has a fundamental impact on how we feel. Two people can go through the same difficulties, but their emotional experience may be completely different due to how they interpret those events. If we see problems as opportunities for growth, we feel empowered. If, on the other hand, we see them as insurmountable obstacles, we feel defeated. The author emphasizes that the ability to change our perspective is what allows us to free ourselves from unhappiness. It's not about denying what's wrong, but focusing on what we can learn from difficulties and how we can grow through them. By doing so, life becomes a series of lessons rather than a constant struggle. The victim mentality versus the responsible mentality. One key concept Shetty introduces in this chapter is the difference between the victim mentality and the responsible mentality. The victim mentality is based on the belief that external circumstances control our lives and that we have no power over what happens to us. People with this mentality tend to feel disempowered and blame others for their unhappiness. They believe the world is unfair and that they are incapable of changing their lives. In contrast, the responsible mentality is the belief that, although we cannot control everything that happens in the world, we can control how we respond to what happens. People with this mentality take responsibility for their well-being and choose how to face challenges. Instead of blaming circumstances, they seek solutions and focus on what they can change rather than what they cannot. Shetty invites us to embrace the responsible mentality. This mentality not only empowers us, but also allows us to grow and learn from difficult situations. When we take responsibility for our lives, we stop being slaves to our circumstances and begin making decisions that truly bring us closer to our goals and happiness. The importance of making conscious decisions. Shetty emphasizes that our happiness is not determined by circumstances or fleeting emotions, but by the decisions we make. If we base our actions solely on our emotions, it's easy to get carried away by fear, anger, or sadness. However, by making conscious decisions that are aligned with our values and goals, we can begin to create a more balanced and fulfilling life. The author encourages us to ensure that every decision we make, big or small, is based on what we truly desire and what makes us feel good about ourselves. This includes deciding how we react to events, how we treat ourselves, and how we relate to others. By making conscious decisions, we can stop acting reactively and start living proactively. The role of gratitude in happiness. A powerful tool Shetty introduces to increase our happiness is gratitude. Often, unhappiness arises because we focus too much on what we lack or what we haven't accomplished. We live in a constant search for more, without stopping to appreciate what we already have. However, gratitude helps us recognize the blessings and opportunities that already exist in our lives. The author suggests that we start the day by focusing on what we have and being grateful for it. Gratitude changes our perspective and allows us to see blessings rather than deficiencies. Practicing gratitude not only increases our happiness, but also shifts our mindset toward one of abundance and fullness, rather than one of scarcity. The effect of self-acceptance on happiness. Another central theme Shetty addresses in this chapter is the relationship between self-acceptance and happiness. Often, our unhappiness stems from a lack of self-acceptance. We live in a constant internal struggle, trying to meet external expectations or comparing ourselves to others. However, self-acceptance is essential for feeling at peace with who we are. The author invites us to accept ourselves as we are, recognizing our imperfections and learning from them. By practicing self-acceptance, we stop seeking external validation and begin finding satisfaction in our own authenticity. This acceptance allows us to live with more freedom and less stress, as we stop fighting against ourselves. The power of choice. Finally, Shetty concludes the chapter with a powerful reflection. Happiness is our choice. No one else has the power to determine how we feel unless we allow them to. At every moment, we have the option to choose how we react and how we face the challenges life presents us. By taking responsibility for our happiness and consciously deciding to live according to our values and goals, we can create a life of satisfaction and peace. Chapter 11. People always choose not to change. Reflections on resistance to change. In this chapter, Shetty delves into one of the most recurring and challenging topics on the path to self-awareness and personal transformation: resistance to change. Although many people long for a fuller and more satisfying life, the reality is that many remain stuck in behavior patterns that keep them stagnant. The author examines why people resist change, how to identify this resistance, and, most importantly, how to overcome it to achieve real growth. The paradox of change. Shetty begins the chapter by highlighting a fundamental paradox. Everyone wants to change, but no one really wants to change. In theory, we desire a better, more successful, and happier life, but in practice, change requires effort, sacrifice, and, above all, stepping out of our comfort zone. This discomfort is often what generates resistance to change. The author explains that change requires breaking away from familiarity. Even when current situations don't make us happy, we are more comfortable with the known than with the unknown, even though the latter offers the possibility of a richer and more fulfilling life. This human tendency to resist change, even when we know it will benefit us, is what keeps many people stuck in their personal progress. The fear of the unknown. According to Shetty, the primary driver of resistance to change is the fear of the unknown. Changing means venturing into territory that we cannot control, which generates anxiety and doubt. Fear becomes a mental break that prevents us from taking the first step. Shetty points out that fear is not only a natural emotion but a powerful tool that can either drive us forward or stop us. The key is learning to manage it. The author explains that many people feel overwhelmed by the uncertainty that comes with change, and this fear of the unknown makes them prefer the security of the known, even if what they know doesn't make them happy. Therefore, resistance to change is based on an aversion to fear, which limits our ability to move forward. The comfort of old habits. Another important factor contributing to resistance to change is our attachment to old habits. Throughout our lives, we have developed routines and behavior patterns that become automatic actions. These habits provide security and save us mental effort, leading us to keep doing the same thing over and over, even if it doesn't take us where we want to go. Shetty points out that the problem isn't the habit itself, but the fact that we cling to them for comfort, even when we know we should change them. Breaking these patterns requires willpower and conscious action. The author encourages us to take an honest look at our habits, questioning which ones are serving us and which are limiting our growth. Internal resistance to change. Shetty highlights that often, the greatest resistance to change comes from within ourselves. We tell ourselves that we are not ready or that we are not capable of doing something different. These limiting beliefs settle in our minds and create an invisible barrier that prevents us from acting. Doubt and self-sabotage are powerful agents of internal resistance because they make us believe that we are not enough to achieve the change we desire. The author shares that change begins with our mindset. To overcome internal resistance, we need to challenge our limiting beliefs and replace them with more empowering thoughts. Mindset is the key that unlocks our ability to create a new reality. Shetty asserts that, ultimately, if we believe we are capable of changing, change will be much more likely than if we continue to think that we lack what it takes to achieve it. The consequences of not changing. Shetty also addresses the consequences of inaction. Although not changing may seem like a safe option in the short term, the consequences of not evolving are much more serious in the long run. If we continue living according to old beliefs and habits that do not benefit us, we risk missing opportunities, staying stagnant, and feeling like we have wasted our potential. The author highlights that the cost of not changing is the lack of progress. Life is dynamic and constantly changing. Those who do not adapt fall behind. The fear of change may keep us comfortable, but as the years pass, we realize that comfort is merely an illusion. By not changing, we lose the opportunity to evolve and become the person we truly want to be. The process of change. Shetty proposes that change does not have to be a quick or drastic process. On the contrary, effective change is achieved through small, consistent steps. The author encourages us to break change down into more manageable parts, making the process less overwhelming. These small, accumulated changes can have a profound impact on our lives, allowing us to develop new skills, create positive habits, and strengthen our resilience. For change to be lasting, Shetty suggests that we should focus on progress, not perfection. Often, resistance to change arises because we seek immediate results or a total transformation from one moment to the next. However, true progress occurs when we celebrate each advance and keep moving forward, even when the results are not immediate. The role of action in change. Shetty emphasizes that action is crucial for change to be real. It doesn't matter how many books we read or how many conversations we have about change. Without action, there will be no transformation. The key is to start taking action, even if it's with small, gradual steps. Action helps us break free from inertia and begin building the future we desire. Every action we take, no matter how small, brings us closer to our goal. Shetty underscores that what's important is to start and persevere, not to wait until everything is figured out or we feel ready. Ultimately, action is what transforms our life. Conclusion of the chapter. The chapter concludes with a powerful reflection. Resistance to change is a natural part of the growth process, but we should not let it paralyze us. The decision to change and evolve is in our hands, and how we respond to that resistance defines the course of our lives. By taking responsibility for our evolution, challenging our limiting beliefs, and acting courageously, we can achieve real and lasting change. Chapter 12. Your life is decided here and now. The present as the engine of transformation. In this chapter, Shetty delves into the power that the present moment holds to transform our lives. The central idea of the chapter is that the present is the only moment in which we truly have control, and it is the place where we can make decisions that will transform our future. The author challenges us to reflect on how the past and future often rob us of the opportunity to live fully in the now. By focusing on the present, we can build a richer and more satisfying life. The importance of the present moment. Shetty begins the chapter with a powerful reflection. The only moment we truly have is the present. People tend to live trapped between the past and the future, either clinging to what was or fearing what will be. However, the author reminds us that we cannot control what has already happened, and the future is uncertain. The only moment over which we have absolute control is now. According to Shetty, the present is fertile ground where we can make decisions that will lead us to where we truly want to be. By concentrating on the present, we begin to take conscious actions that allow us to move forward, instead of waiting for perfect conditions or for the future to offer us a better opportunity. Living in the present does not mean ignoring the future or the past, but rather invites us to act here and now in a way that can create the future we desire. The trap of the past. One of the main reasons why many people do not live in the present is because they are trapped in the past. Shetty describes how often our emotional wounds or past mistakes affect the way we live in the present. We anchor ourselves in guilt or resentment and allow those memories to condition our current decisions. The author explains that clinging to the past doesn't help us heal or move forward. Instead, it prevents us from living with emotional freedom. The past is gone, and although we can learn from it, we cannot change what happened. Shetty encourages us to let go of the emotional weight of the past and to forgive both others and ourselves. By freeing ourselves from the emotional chains of the past, we can start living more fully in the present. The fear of the future. Another major obstacle that prevents us from living in the present is the fear of the future. Often, our minds are filled with worries about what might happen, whether it's the fear of failure, not being good enough, or something negative occurring. Shetty points out that although this fear is natural, living while anticipating the worst only leads to a life of constant stress and prevents us from enjoying the present. The author challenges us to face the fear of the future. He reminds us that the future is uncertain, and we cannot control it, but we can face it with courage. The fear of the future should not hold us back. Instead, it should motivate us to take action in the present. In fact, the decisions we make today will have a more positive influence on our future than if we stay trapped in worries or the desire to control everything. The power of action in the present. Shetty emphasizes that action in the present is the only path to change and transformation. He invites us to stop waiting for the perfect moment or for circumstances to change before taking the first step. Action is the engine that drives change, and it is only by taking action that we can create the life we want. The author explains that many people wait to have all the answers, to feel fully ready, or to find the ideal conditions before acting. However, the perfect moment never comes. The true magic of change happens when we begin to act, despite fear or uncertainty. Every small action we take in the present has a profound impact and creates a cumulative effect that brings us closer to our goal. The power of decision. The chapter also highlights the power of decision in the transformation process. Shetty reminds us that every decision we make, no matter how small, has the power to redirect our life. Deciding to live consciously, with purpose, and aligned with our values leads us to make wiser decisions and have a clear sense of direction. The author asserts that people who live reactively, following the ups and downs of daily life, are the ones who lose control of their life. Making conscious decisions places us in the position to create our reality without being ruled by external circumstances. Taking responsibility for our present and making decisions aligned with what we truly want is what allows us to transform our life. The importance of daily reflection. Shetty also discusses how daily reflection can help us stay focused on the present. Reflection allows us to evaluate our decisions, recognize the progress we've made, and adjust our direction when necessary. The author suggests that a daily reflection practice at the end of each day, in which we ask ourselves, what did I decide to act on today to move closer to my goals? How have I lived according to my values? Can be extremely powerful. Daily reflection also allows us to recognize the lessons we've learned from our mistakes and celebrate our successes. When we live this way, we stay present and do not allow the past or the future to steal the opportunity to enjoy the small moments that really matter. The present as the engine of change. Shetty concludes the chapter with a powerful statement. The present is the engine of our transformation. He reminds us that the future is built now, and everything we decide today impacts how our life will be in the years to come. If we live each day with intention and awareness, we can shape the future we desire. The author encourages us to act now, without waiting for everything to be perfect, because real change begins with small daily decisions. If we want to live a more satisfying life, we must start with action in the present and stop waiting for external circumstances to change on their own. True freedom comes from living with full awareness of our decisions and taking action in the present moment. Chapter 13. The Second Night. All problems are about interpersonal relationships. In this chapter, Shetty addresses one of the most fundamental aspects of human life, interpersonal relationships. Throughout the chapter, He invites us to reflect on how our relationships with others are often the root of many of our problems and, at the same time, the path to resolving those problems. According to Shetty, every conflict, dissatisfaction, or challenge we face in our life is deeply related to the way we interact with others. The importance of interpersonal relationships. Shetty begins this chapter by highlighting that, regardless of our personal or professional goals, relationships with others are one of the most powerful forces in our lives. Healthy and positive relationships can be a constant source of emotional support, growth, and happiness, while toxic or destructive relationships can generate stress, anxiety, and discontent. The author points out that, in most cases, the emotional problems we face are not isolated or merely personal, but are directly related to how we relate to those around us. Whether with family, friends, colleagues, or even strangers, our interactions and the quality of those relationships play a fundamental role in our emotional well-being. The root of conflicts. One of the key ideas Shetty presents in this chapter is that all conflicts have their roots in relationships. From a disagreement at work to a personal issue, the origin is often related to misunderstandings, lack of communication, or emotional differences. These tensions often arise because we don't truly understand others or are not able to express our own emotions effectively. The author emphasizes that, although we all have different perspectives and emotional needs, most conflicts can be resolved through better communication and a greater understanding of the other person's emotions and motivations. Instead of seeing others as enemies or obstacles, we must learn to see them as life companions with whom we can build a relationship of mutual respect. The key to resolving conflicts. Shetty suggests that the key to resolving conflicts is self-awareness and empathy. Empathy is the ability to put ourselves in the other person's shoes and see situations from their perspective. When we practice empathy, our reactions become less defensive and more open, which makes it easier to resolve conflicts peacefully and constructively. The author emphasizes that actively listening to the other person is crucial. Often, conflicts arise because we are not truly listening to what the other person is trying to say. Instead of waiting for our turn to speak, Shetty encourages us to listen deeply, ask questions, and reflect on what the other person is feeling. This attitude of genuine understanding allows both parties to feel valued and can be the foundation for a positive resolution of the conflict. The importance of emotional honesty. Often, relationships deteriorate because people do not openly express their emotions. Whether it is due to fear of rejection, hurting the other person, or fear that their feelings will not be understood, we tend to keep our emotions to ourselves. Shetty points out that this lack of emotional expression creates invisible barriers that affect our relationships and prevent us from resolving conflicts effectively. The author emphasizes that being emotionally honest with others is essential for maintaining authentic relationships. By expressing our emotions honestly and respectfully, we create a space where both parties can share their feelings and find a joint solution. Emotional vulnerability, far from being a weakness, is a strength that allows for a deeper and more meaningful connection with others. The importance of personal responsibility in relationships. One of the most powerful lessons in this chapter is the personal responsibility we must take in all our relationships. We often tend to blame others for the conflicts we face, but Shetty reminds us that we are responsible for our part in any relationship. If we want our relationships to improve, we must start with ourselves. The author suggests that before blaming others, we should engage in personal reflection about our behavior, reactions, and actions within the relationship. Are we contributing to the conflict in any way? Are we clearly communicating what we need or want? Are we being empathetic with the other person? By taking responsibility for our interactions, we can change our perspective and improve our relationships. Breaking negative cycles. In many relationships, especially those that have become toxic, there is a negative cycle that repeats itself continuously. Shetty explains how automatic responses and misinterpretations can trigger a cycle of emotional reaction that escalates quickly. This cycle can create resentment and distrust if it is not interrupted. The author recommends that, to break these cycles, we should stop before reacting and take a moment to think. Instead of responding impulsively, we can practice emotional self-regulation and choose a more mindful response. This not only improves the quality of our relationships but also allows us to live with more emotional clarity and peace. Transformation through relationships. The chapter concludes with the reflection that our relationships are one of the greatest sources of personal growth. Through our interactions with others, we learn to develop empathy, improve our communication, and take responsibility for creating healthy relationships. Each conflict, if handled correctly, can be a learning opportunity that helps us transform and become better versions of ourselves. Shetty highlights that relationships are one of the most powerful sources of well-being and growth. If we are able to improve our ability to relate consciously, respectfully, and empathetically, our lives will be greatly enriched. This chapter invites us to reflect deeply on our relationships and how they have the power to profoundly influence our happiness and growth. By learning to communicate effectively, take responsibility for our actions, and break negative cycles, we can improve our interactions with others and create more authentic and fulfilling relationships. Chapter 14. Why You Don't Like Yourself, The Origin of Low Self-Esteem. In this chapter, Shetty explores one of the most important and delicate topics in personal development, low self-esteem. He challenges us to understand why we feel so dissatisfied with ourselves and, more importantly, to discover how we can transform that negative relationship with ourselves into one based on self-love, acceptance, and respect. The origin of low self-esteem. Shetty begins the chapter by revealing that low self-esteem is not something we are born with. Rather, it is the result of past experiences, external messages, and negative beliefs we have accumulated over the years. From childhood, we are taught to compare ourselves to others, to seek external validation, and to define our worth based on what others think of us. The author highlights that modern society, in particular, plays a crucial role in low self-esteem. In a world saturated with images of perfection and unattainable standards, many people feel that they are never good enough or that if they don't meet certain expectations, they don't deserve to be loved or accepted. Shetty invites us to challenge these messages and understand that a person's worth is not measured by their professional success, physical appearance, or their ability to please others. True worth lies in who we are on the inside, in our humanity, and in our ability to accept and love ourselves as we are. The influence of childhood. The author also discusses the influence of childhood on the formation of our self-esteem. Many of us grow up with the belief that we are not enough due to family or school messages that make us feel we don't meet expectations. Comments such as "you're not good enough" or "you're not capable of doing this" can be etched into our minds and shape our limiting beliefs throughout life. Shetty explains that these beliefs settle into the subconscious and affect our self-perception. As we grow older, we internalize these ideas and make them part of our identity. We stop questioning them and begin to live under the shadow of these false perceptions of ourselves. The author urges us to break free from these beliefs and realize that we are not what others told us we were. We are capable of redefining our identity and rebuilding our self-esteem from a place of self-love and acceptance. The constant comparison. Shetty also addresses the danger of constant comparison. We live in an era where we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, whether through social media, at work, or in our relationships. Comparison makes us feel that we are not enough, that we don't have what others have, or that we are not as successful as we would like to be. The author reminds us that comparison is an unfair game, because there will always be someone better or worse than us in some aspect. However, constant comparison robs us of peace and self-confidence. Instead of comparing ourselves, Shetty encourages us to focus on our own journey, celebrating our strengths and recognizing our weaknesses without judgment. The impact of external expectations. Another factor that contributes to low self-esteem is the pressure of external expectations. From childhood, we are taught to please others, to follow social norms, and to adapt to the success and beauty standards set by society. However, this pressure can make us feel that our worth is tied to the opinions of others. Shetty challenges us to free ourselves from this need for external validation. Instead of seeking approval from others, we must learn to validate ourselves, basing our self-esteem on our own sense of worth and not on what others think of us. How to overcome low self-esteem. Shetty presents several strategies to overcome low self-esteem and start rebuilding a healthier relationship with ourselves. Self-compassion. The key to overcoming low self-esteem is learning to be kind to ourselves. Instead of criticizing and judging our mistakes, we should practice self-compassion, treating our mind and body with the same care and respect we would give a dear friend. Challenging limiting beliefs. Often, low self-esteem is based on limiting beliefs we have internalized over the years. The author encourages us to identify these beliefs and question them. We can replace them with more positive and realistic affirmations about our ability to learn, grow, and overcome obstacles. Setting healthy boundaries. To improve our self-esteem, we must learn to say no when something is not aligned with our values. Setting boundaries is a way of respecting ourselves and protecting our energy from external influences that do not benefit us. Practicing gratitude. Gratitude is a powerful tool for improving our relationship with ourselves. By focusing on what we have and what we have achieved, we shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance, which strengthens our self-esteem. Taking care of our mental and emotional health. Taking time to care for our emotional and mental health is crucial. This includes meditation, deep conversations with supportive people, and activities that recharge us emotionally. The importance of self-acceptance. The author concludes this chapter with a key reflection on self-acceptance. Accepting ourselves as we are, with our imperfections, strengths, and weaknesses, is fundamental to building a strong and lasting self-esteem. The true beauty of our humanity lies in authenticity and in living without masks. When we learn to accept ourselves, we free ourselves from the need to please others or to meet external expectations. Conclusion. This chapter invites us to reflect deeply on our relationship with ourselves and how low self-esteem is formed from limiting beliefs, constant comparisons, and external expectations. By learning to practice self-compassion, challenge our negative beliefs, set healthy boundaries, and foster gratitude, we can rebuild a positive relationship with ourselves. In doing so, our self-esteem becomes a solid foundation for living a more authentic, fulfilling, and empowered life. Chapter 15. The Feeling of Inferiority. Conjectures and realities. In this chapter, Shetty delves into the complex concept of the feeling of inferiority, an emotion that affects many people throughout their lives. The author explores the causes of this feeling, how it manifests in our relationships and self-perception, and how we can transform it into a source of growth and empowerment. The origin of the feeling of inferiority. Shetty begins the chapter by explaining that the feeling of inferiority is a natural human emotion, something we all experience at some point in our lives. However, this feeling becomes problematic when we don't manage it properly and allow it to control our lives. Often, the feeling of inferiority originates from social comparisons, where we measure our personal worth based on what others have or achieve. This feeling can stem from childhood experiences when, for example, our parents or teachers made us feel we weren't good enough. However, Shetty also emphasizes that the feeling of inferiority does not necessarily have to do with objective reality, but with the perception we have of ourselves in relation to others. The author explains that society plays an important role in forming this feeling, as we are constantly exposed to success models that make us feel inadequate if we don't meet certain standards. Social media, in particular, reinforces this feeling by showing us seemingly perfect lives, making us compare ourselves and feel inferior. The mentality of constant competition. Shetty continues by pointing out how the constant competition in modern society fuels the feeling of inferiority. From an early age, we are taught to compete with others, to measure our success by others' achievements. This creates a mindset of scarcity, where we believe that if others are successful, we cannot have the same. The author proposes that this competitive approach is not only exhausting but also false, as success is not a limited resource. By living with an abundance mindset, we can understand that the success of others does not take away from ours but can serve as inspiration. Shetty invites us to free ourselves from the idea that we should compete with others and instead focus on our own path. The impact of the feeling of inferiority on our relationships. One of the most devastating effects of the feeling of inferiority is how it affects our interpersonal relationships. When we feel inferior, we tend to seek external validation or compete with others instead of connecting authentically. This fear of judgment or need for approval can create superficial or tense relationships based on comparison rather than authenticity. Shetty emphasizes that the feeling of inferiority can also lead us to avoid social situations or isolate ourselves for fear of being rejected. When we see ourselves as inferior, we project insecurity in social interactions, which in turn may be perceived by others, creating a vicious cycle of lack of connection and loneliness. The author encourages us to work on our self-confidence in order to break this cycle. In doing so, we not only improve our relationship with ourselves but also create deeper and more authentic relationships with others, transforming the feeling of inferiority into strength. One of the key points of this chapter is the transformation of the feeling of inferiority into a source of personal growth. Shetty explains that while it is common to feel inferior at certain moments, this feeling does not have to be a weakness. In fact, it can be a powerful signal that there are areas of our life in which we need to work and grow. Instead of succumbing to self-criticism or despair, Shetty encourages us to use the feeling of inferiority as motivation to improve ourselves. By recognizing our weaknesses and working on them, we can turn our sense of inadequacy into a strength that drives us toward personal growth. The value of vulnerability. The author also highlights the value of vulnerability in overcoming the feeling of inferiority. Often, insecurity leads us to hide our imperfections and protect our image in front of others. However, Shetty reminds us that being vulnerable and showing our weaknesses is one of the most powerful ways to connect authentically with others. Vulnerability is not a sign of weakness, but a strength that allows people to relate more deeply. By accepting our imperfections and sharing them with others, we free others to do the same. This authenticity is the foundation of healthy relationships and helps us embrace our imperfections without feeling inferior. The path to healthy self-esteem. Shetty guides us toward the development of healthy self-esteem, based on self-acceptance and the understanding of our intrinsic worth. Instead of seeking external validation, we must learn to validate ourselves. Self-acceptance is key to freeing ourselves from the tyranny of comparison and realizing that we are already enough as we are. The author emphasizes that self-esteem is not built through perfection or fulfilling others' expectations, but through authenticity, self-love, and respect for our intrinsic worth. Chapter conclusion. Shetty concludes this chapter with a powerful reflection on how the feeling of inferiority does not have to control us. If we understand it as a signal of areas in which we can grow, we can use it as motivation for personal development. The key to overcoming this feeling is accepting ourselves, embracing our vulnerability, and celebrating what makes us unique. Chapter 16. Life is not a competition. Letting go of constant competition. In this chapter, Shetty examines the deeply ingrained concept in our society that life is a constant competition. From an early age, we are taught to compare ourselves to others, compete for what we want, and measure our worth based on how we outperform others. However, the author argues that this competitive mindset is not only exhausting but also destructive to our emotional and mental well-being. Instead of living our lives as a competition, Shetty suggests that we can embrace cooperation and personal growth as the true drivers of our happiness and success. The culture of competition. Shetty begins this chapter discussing the competitive culture that permeates almost every aspect of our lives. From school to social media, we are constantly comparing ourselves to others, measuring our success according to what others achieve. This constant competition creates a sense of inadequacy and frustration, as there is always someone faster, smarter, or more successful than us. The author invites us to reflect on how this competitive mindset affects our emotions and relationships. Living in a constant state of comparison, we never feel like we are good enough, contributing to low self-esteem and chronic stress. Shetty explains that perpetual competition makes us feel like we never reach the finish line, regardless of our achievements. The trap of comparisons. As we progress in life, Shetty highlights how comparisons trap us in an endless race. Comparing ourselves to others is not only unnecessary but steals the present from us, as our focus shifts away from our own strengths and accomplishments. Instead of appreciating what we've achieved, we focus on what we still lack compared to others. The author suggests we must free ourselves from the trap of comparisons. He encourages us to celebrate our own achievements and recognize the value of our uniqueness. Each person has their own path and timing, and comparisons only distract us from what really matters: living an authentic and fulfilling life on our own terms, not based on others. Internal competition. Shetty also delves into internal competition, which is even more insidious than external competition. Often, we are so focused on what others are achieving that we forget about our own growth. Internal competition arises when we measure ourselves against impossible standards of perfection. Instead of feeling happy for the progress we've made, we demand to be better, faster, and more successful without accepting our imperfections. This cycle of self-demand can lead to anxiety and burnout, as we never feel satisfied with what we have. The author suggests that we must learn to be kind to ourselves and stop constantly competing against our own reflection. By accepting that progress is not linear and that everyone has their own pace, we can enjoy the growth journey without feeling like we're competing with our own ideals. Collaboration over competition. Instead of seeing others as competitors, Shetty invites us to adopt a mindset of collaboration. The true richness of life does not lie in surpassing others, but in learning together and supporting one another along the way. By collaborating with others instead of competing, we create an environment of mutual support that helps us grow faster and more healthily. The author explains that competition fosters a sense of isolation, while collaboration builds stronger, more connected communities. By working together toward common goals, we not only achieve more, but we also enjoy the process of growth and learning. The concept of success. Shetty redefines the concept of success in this chapter, moving away from the conventional idea that it is measured by the accumulation of achievements or comparisons to others. Instead of focusing on competition, the author proposes that true success lies in living a life aligned with our values and feeling at peace with ourselves. Success is not a race to the top but a continuous journey of personal growth and fulfillment. Success, then, is not about being the best in the world but about being the best for yourself. By focusing our energy on growing as individuals and not competing with others, we achieve a more genuine and lasting success, one that does not depend on external validation. How to let go of competition. Shetty offers strategies to start freeing ourselves from the competitive mindset. Cultivate gratitude. Gratitude helps us focus on what we have, rather than on what we lack. Practicing gratitude allows us to appreciate our journey and blessings without comparing ourselves to what others have. Foster collaborative relationships. By surrounding ourselves with people who support and are willing to collaborate, we create a community that fosters mutual growth and shared success. Celebrate others' achievements. Instead of seeing others as competitors, we can learn to celebrate their successes as if they were our own. This shifts our mindset toward abundance rather than scarcity. Reframe our definition of success. Taking the time to define success in terms of personal growth, authenticity, and well-being helps us move away from societal expectations. Chapter conclusion. This chapter invites us to free ourselves from the constant need to compete and live with a mindset of collaboration and abundance. By letting go of competition and focusing on our own journey toward success, we can create a more authentic, satisfying, and fulfilling life. Instead of measuring our worth by others' achievements, we can define success as a path of personal growth aligned with our own values. Chapter 17. From power struggles to revenge, overcoming resentment. In this chapter, Shetty addresses one of the most painful and harmful topics to our emotional health: resentment. Throughout our lives, we all experience situations where we feel hurt or betrayed by others. While resentment is natural, it can turn into a heavy burden that affects our mental health, our relationships, and our ability to live a fulfilling life. Shetty explores how to overcome resentment and free ourselves from the desire for revenge to regain our inner peace. The nature of resentment. Shetty begins the chapter explaining that resentment is a common emotion, but if not managed properly, it can destroy our peace and happiness. Resentment arises when we feel we've been treated unjustly or betrayed, and it's often accompanied by the feeling that we deserve revenge or justice for what has been done to us. However, Resentment feeds on bitterness and the desire for retribution, trapping us in the past and preventing us from moving forward. The author emphasizes that resentment is not just a negative feeling, but a choice we make when we cling to the wounds of the past. We hold on to the idea that we need justice or retribution, but in reality, resentment only consumes us, not the person who hurt us. The trap of revenge. One of the most destructive aspects of resentment is the desire for revenge. Shetty explains that when we cling to the need to make someone pay for what they've done to us, we lose control over our own life. Instead of healing and moving forward, we remain trapped in a cycle of bitterness that prevents us from experiencing inner peace. The author points out that revenge never brings true satisfaction. Although we may feel a brief emotional relief, the desire for revenge only perpetuates suffering and connects us even more with the person who hurt us. Instead of freeing our anger, revenge keeps us emotionally tied to that person and the negative situation we went through. Shetty challenges us to break this cycle and understand that, to heal, we don't need to make others pay, but to forgive and free ourselves from the power that the wound has over us. Release through forgiveness. The key to overcoming resentment, according to Shetty, is forgiveness. While forgiveness doesn't mean justifying the harm or forgetting what happened, it is an act of liberation that allows us to regain our peace. Forgiveness is not something we do for the other person, but for ourselves, to free us from the emotional burden that prevents us from moving forward. The author explains that forgiveness is a conscious process that requires inner strength. It's not about denying the wounds or minimizing the pain, but about recognizing the suffering and deciding to release it in order to live a full life. When we forgive, we stop being victims of our past experiences and take control of our emotional well-being. The power of forgiveness to heal relationships. Shetty also speaks about the impact that forgiveness has on our relationships. Often, when we feel resentment, our relationship with the person who hurt us is affected by distrust, anger, or animosity. However, by forgiving, we not only heal our own soul, but we also open space for reconciliation and healing the relationship. The author clarifies that forgiveness does not mean we must rebuild a toxic relationship or allow someone to hurt us again, but it means letting go of the emotional burden and closing the chapter on the wound. By doing so, we regain our emotional freedom and stop living trapped in the past. Forgiveness as an act of self-love. A key idea that Shetty emphasizes is that forgiveness is, ultimately, an act of self-love. When we don't forgive, we allow others to continue controlling our emotions and well-being. Resentment, like the desire for revenge, keeps us trapped in a destructive dynamic that robs us of our peace. Forgiveness, on the other hand, frees us and allows us to move forward with emotional freedom. The author encourages us to see forgiveness as a form of self-compassion. By freeing ourselves from the emotional burdens we carry, we can heal and begin living more authentically. Forgiveness not only liberates others, but it also frees us. Inner peace as a result of forgiveness. Shetty concludes the chapter by stating that true inner peace arises when we are able to forgive. Peace does not depend on the absence of conflict but on our ability to free ourselves from the anger and resentment that keep us emotionally trapped. When we choose to forgive, we free ourselves from the chains that bind us to past experiences and take control of our present. The author also mentions that forgiveness is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process. As we face new challenges or conflicts, we must be willing to forgive again to maintain our emotional peace. Forgiveness is a practice that strengthens our emotional resilience and allows us to live with more serenity. Chapter conclusion. This chapter challenges us to free ourselves from resentment and revenge, which are emotional burdens that only prevent us from moving forward in life. According to Shetty, forgiveness is the key to achieving inner peace, regaining our emotional freedom, and healing both our relationships and our own mental health. By practicing forgiveness, we not only heal the wounds of the past but also allow ourselves to live more authentically and serenely. Chapter 18. Don't believe the vital lies. Breaking the myths about happiness. In this chapter, Shetty addresses the common myths or lies that people believe about happiness and how these misconceptions affect our lives. Throughout the chapter, the author invites us to rethink our conceptions of what truly contributes to happiness and to free ourselves from preconceived ideas imposed by society, the media, or our past experiences. The vital lies we're sold. Shetty begins the chapter by listing some of the vital lies that society makes us believe, which condition us to think that happiness depends on external things or material achievements. Some of these lies include: happiness comes from having more money. Many people believe that wealth or financial stability is the key to happiness. However, Shetty reminds us that while money can provide comfort, it is not a guarantee of lasting happiness. True happiness comes from inner peace, meaningful relationships, and personal fulfillment, not material goods. Success at work or fame will make us happy. We live in a society that greatly values professional success and fame, but Shetty points out that these achievements can bring external pressures and stress, without providing the emotional fulfillment we expect. Often, people reach success only to realize that true happiness does not come from external goals but from living a life aligned with our values. Romantic love is the key to happiness. While romantic relationships can bring great happiness, Shetty challenges the idea that we need to find the perfect person to be complete or happy. Genuine happiness comes from emotional self-sufficiency and cultivating a healthy relationship with ourselves, which allows us to have more fulfilling and mutually respectful romantic relationships. The constant search for external validation. Another common myth is the belief that external validation is essential for our happiness. Many people spend their lives seeking approval from others: friends, family, coworkers, social media. Shetty highlights that the need for validation comes from inner insecurity and can be a source of stress and frustration. The author invites us to break free from this constant need for others to validate our choices and achievements. Instead of living for external approval, Shetty proposes that we seek validation within ourselves. Self-acceptance and self-worth are key to living authentically, without being conditioned by others' expectations or opinions. The myth of perfection. Shetty also points out that many people fall into the trap of the myth of perfection. We believe that if we are perfect, we will be happy. Whether in our relationships, career, or physical appearance, the idea that we need to be perfect leads to constant self-criticism and feelings of inadequacy. The author emphasizes that perfection is unattainable and, in many cases, a destructive illusion. Instead of seeking perfection, we must learn to accept ourselves as we are, with our imperfections and flaws, as these are a natural part of our humanity. Self-compassion and self-forgiveness are essential to freeing ourselves from the pressure to be perfect. Happiness is not in the future. Shetty also challenges the myth that happiness is in the future. How many times do we tell ourselves we'll be happy when we achieve something specific: a promotion, losing weight, moving to a better house, getting married, etc.? This mentality of waiting for something to happen to be happy keeps us trapped in constant dissatisfaction, as we're always waiting for the future instead of enjoying the here and now. The author encourages us to live in the present, as the future never arrives the way we expect. While we may have goals and dreams, happiness is found in enjoying the process and appreciating what we have now, not just in what we hope to achieve later. The importance of gratitude. A key concept that Shetty introduces in this chapter is the power of gratitude. According to Shetty, gratitude is one of the most powerful tools for transforming our outlook on life and our relationship with happiness. Instead of focusing on what we lack, we should focus on what we have and appreciate it. The author invites us to practice gratitude daily. By taking time to reflect on the small things that bring us happiness, such as a good cup of coffee in the morning, a conversation with a friend, or a personal achievement, we can begin to shift our mindset from scarcity to abundance. Practicing gratitude anchors us to the present and allows us to enjoy life as it is. Challenging limiting beliefs. Shetty also emphasizes the importance of identifying and challenging our limiting beliefs about happiness. Often, we hold on to ideas we've learned over the years, whether from our parents, culture, or society in general. These beliefs limit us and prevent us from attaining happiness, as they make us think there's something beyond our control that we need in order to be happy. The author encourages us to question these beliefs and replace them with more empowering thoughts. Happiness does not depend on external factors, but on how we choose to view the world and our lives. By changing our beliefs, we change our reality. Chapter conclusion. This chapter challenges us to break the myths we've believed about happiness and to redefine what it truly means to live a fulfilling life. Happiness is not found in perfection, material achievements, or external validation. True happiness comes from accepting ourselves, enjoying the present, and practicing gratitude. By freeing ourselves from the vital myths, we can begin to live an authentic, fulfilling life in peace with ourselves. Chapter 19, The Third Night. Don't take on others' tasks. In this chapter, Shetty confronts one of the most common behaviors that affect our inner peace and relationships, interfering in others' lives or worrying about things that are beyond our control. Often, in our eagerness to help or desire to please, we end up taking on others' responsibilities and losing ourselves in their tasks, which can lead to unnecessary stress and toxic relationships. Shetty invites us to reflect on the importance of taking care of ourselves and letting others manage their own affairs. The urge to take on others' responsibilities. Shetty begins the chapter by exploring why many people feel the need to get involved in other people's problems. Sometimes, we believe that by helping others solve their problems, we are being good friends, family members, or coworkers. However, this attitude often arises from a desire for control or a need to feel like we are doing something useful. The author points out that this desire to solve others' problems comes from a lack of boundaries. When we become too involved in other people's lives, we stop focusing on our own goals and needs. This not only causes stress, but it also prevents others from taking responsibility for their own lives. Instead of being a genuine help, we end up contributing to the dependency and lack of autonomy of others. The harm of not respecting boundaries. Shetty emphasizes the importance of respecting boundaries in both our personal relationships and professional life. Often, the desire to do everything for others stems from a sense of responsibility or guilt, leading us to interfere where we shouldn't. However, this attitude of violating others' boundaries creates resentment, as others don't have the chance to learn or grow on their own. The author underscores that each person has their own challenges and lessons to learn through their own experiences. By constantly intervening, we are stealing from the other person the opportunity to learn from their own mistakes and grow autonomously. Shetty encourages us to maintain our boundaries and allow others to take care of their own responsibilities. The art of letting go of control. One of the key aspects of the chapter is the idea of letting go of control. Often, the tendency to get involved in others' problems comes from a desire to control or fix what we can't. Shetty points out that, while we can offer emotional support or helpful advice, we should never take on the responsibility of solving others' problems. The author challenges us to let go of the need for control and understand that we are not responsible for the happiness or decisions of others. While it's natural to want to help, it's important to know when to step back and allow others to take responsibility for their own lives. Respecting their decisions, even if we don't agree with them, is a way to honor their autonomy. How to set healthy boundaries. Shetty offers several strategies for setting healthy boundaries in our relationships. Learn to say no. The first step in respecting others' boundaries is learning to say no when someone asks us to do something we can't or aren't willing to do. Saying no doesn't mean we don't care about the other person, but that we recognize the need to take care of our own needs and priorities. Be aware of our emotions. Often, when we become too involved in others' lives, it's because we feel guilt, fear, or the need to please. Shetty suggests we should recognize our emotions and understand why we feel the need to intervene. By being more aware of our internal motives, we can act in a more balanced way. Offer support without assuming responsibility. The author highlights that we can support others without having to solve their problems. By actively listening, giving advice, and offering emotional support, we can be present for others without taking on their burden. Cultivate self-compassion. To set healthy boundaries, it's also important to be kind to ourselves. By recognizing that our needs and goals are as important as those of others, we can prioritize our well-being and avoid emotional burnout. The consequences of not letting go. Shetty also highlights the consequences of not respecting boundaries, both for ourselves and for others. By constantly getting involved in others' problems, we emotionally drain ourselves, which can affect our mental health and overall well-being. Additionally, by not letting go of control, we prevent people from growing or learning from their own mistakes. The author explains that, While the desire to help is natural, overprotecting or constantly intervening prevents others from making decisions and taking responsibility for their lives. This can create an unbalanced relationship, where one person becomes a dominant figure and the other a dependent one. The power of letting go and trusting. The chapter concludes with a reflection on the power of letting go and trusting that others can manage their own lives. Shetty reminds us that true compassion and support don't always consist of solving others' problems, but rather giving them space to learn and grow on their own. By letting go of the need to control and take on others' responsibilities, we free ourselves to live more autonomously and balanced, and allow others to experience their own growth process. Chapter 20, Conclusion: How to live in peace with yourself and others. In this final chapter, Shetty brings together all the principles and teachings he has developed throughout the book and applies them to the central idea of living in peace with oneself and with others. Both internal and external peace are the result of having learned to manage our emotions, relationships, and expectations in a conscious and authentic way. Shetty invites us to reflect on how we can apply these principles to live a fuller, more balanced, and satisfying life without being trapped by stress, competition, or external expectations. Inner peace as the foundation of happiness. Shetty begins the conclusion by pointing out that inner peace is the foundation on which we build a happy and authentic life. Peace is not something found outside, in achievements or in others' validation, but must be cultivated within ourselves. To achieve it, we must learn to accept who we are, embrace our imperfections, and live according to our values and principles. The author explains that inner peace is achieved when we stop pursuing external goals that promise happiness and begin to appreciate the present, practice gratitude, and live with purpose. When we focus on what truly matters, we can free ourselves from anxiety and find the mental tranquility we seek. Forgiveness as a tool for peace. One of the recurring themes in the book is the power of forgiveness, both towards others and ourselves. Shetty reiterates that forgiveness is not just an act of liberation for the person who has hurt us, but an essential tool for achieving inner peace. By forgiving, we break the emotional ties that bind us to the past and stop carrying the resentment that prevents our healing. Forgiveness also frees us from the need for control and vengeance and helps us create space for healthier, more authentic relationships. Shetty encourages us to see forgiveness as a gift we give ourselves, not just as a way to heal relationships, but as a way to heal our own souls. Letting go of the ego. Another key concept Shetty addresses in this chapter is the importance of letting go of the ego. The ego is the part of us that constantly seeks recognition, approval, and superiority over others. The ego keeps us trapped in competition, comparison, and the need for external validation. Shetty explains that by letting go of the ego, we can begin to live with more humility, authenticity, and compassion. The author points out that letting go of the ego does not mean giving up ambition or self-expression, but freeing ourselves from the need to be recognized by others and focusing on what truly matters. By letting go of the ego, we free ourselves from the burden of having to be perfect or constantly seeking validation from others, and instead, begin to live according to our own values and principles. The importance of healthy relationships. Shetty also dedicates an important part of the conclusion to the idea that our relationships are fundamental to living in peace with others. Healthy relationships are based on mutual respect, open communication, empathy, and genuine appreciation. Instead of seeing others as competition, we should learn to see them as travel companions on the journey of life. The author emphasizes that healthy boundaries and authenticity are essential to prevent relationships from becoming toxic. While relationships can be a source of support, they can also become fertile ground for resentment and emotional dependence if we are not clear on our boundaries and unwilling to let go of control. Life as a path of self-discovery. Shetty concludes the book by highlighting that life is a continuous journey of self-discovery. Peace is not found in a final destination, but in the path we walk as we learn to become more conscious of ourselves, accept our shadows, and cultivate self-compassion. Every moment is an opportunity to learn, grow, and become the best version of ourselves. The author invites us to walk the path of life with grace, appreciation, and patience, recognizing that the process of transformation is slow but steady. By learning to live in peace with ourselves, we open up to the possibility of creating more authentic relationships and living a full and fulfilling life. Final conclusion of the book. The last chapter of Think Like a Monk leaves us with a powerful reflection on how we can live in peace with ourselves and others. Through forgiveness, acceptance, letting go of the ego, and the constant pursuit of self-discovery, we can find the inner peace we all desire and build a more authentic and fulfilling life. Shetty reminds us that happiness is not found in external things or perfection, but in the self-acceptance and self-love we cultivate every day. If you're ready to begin applying these teachings in your daily life and continue growing on the path to inner peace, you can start taking steps toward a more conscious, fulfilling life, free from the emotional burdens of the past. This book is just the beginning of a journey toward a deeper and more connected life, and Shetty encourages us to keep learning and practicing the principles of monastic wisdom to live with purpose and peace. Final conclusion. In this final chapter, Shetty invites us to reflect on everything we've learned throughout the book and to apply the principles of monastic thinking to our daily lives. He reminds us that true peace comes from living in harmony with ourselves and others, breaking the vital lies that distance us from real happiness, and learning to forgive both others and ourselves. The key lies in letting go of external expectations and living authentically, cultivating a life of gratitude, self-compassion, and authenticity. By embracing our vulnerability, letting go of the ego, and setting healthy boundaries in our relationships, we can create an environment where peace and fulfillment are possible. Now that you have the tools to live with more serenity and less stress, the path to inner peace is within your reach. Think like a monk and transform your life to be more authentic, fulfilled, and happy. If you enjoyed this journey toward personal transformation, don't forget to subscribe to Audio Mentors to keep exploring more books and teachings that will help you continue growing every day. See you in the next audiobook.